Recently I made my first Repro Labels purchase, and it got me thinking of some of the old toys from the TF16 of 2016 list, or rather the ones that didn't quite make it.
Let's get right into the reviews!
As a massive fan of small-scale Transformers, I was amazed when DX9 revealed they were doing a Legend-scale Devastator. I didn't actually pick one up when it first came out though, because let's face it, this thing was just way too pricey. So let me get this straight. You're telling me that somehow this is more expensive than this, and almost this? I'm sorry, but no. Just no. Eventually some guy from China was selling them for about $120 Australian, so you can imagine I jumped at the chance. When they finally arrived, I was somewhat disappointed. I mean, none of them were bad per se, but each of them just feel a little off in their own unique ways. I can't help but feel that DX9 doesn't have the knack for making Legends figures to the level of Hasbro or Iron Factory, at least when it comes to the robot modes, because as we all know, Iron Factory doesn't have the best vehicle modes. I'm starting off in robot mode because it's easier to go to the combined mode from the vehicles. Also, I lost the 7 guns for these guys, being 6 for them and 1 for Scourge, not included. But they worked out well enough, although you'll probably lose them as well. Also, I lost the construction beam for combined mode. It's pretty dumb anyway though. Nothing of value was lost. Not sure what order to go in, as although there is a worst figure, there isn't really a best one. So for sake of simplicity, I'll do the order of being combined. Starting off with Scrapper, and no, these guys don't really have individual names, except they kinda do, except they don't really mention them, so I'm gonna use the traditional names, except I do that anyway because this is my show. He's easily the best looking in robot mode. This is usually the case because he has to undergo the least amount of transformation. However, even with DX9's extra flavour, the robot mode turned out pretty phenomenal. I especially like how the legs turned out, with their tiny little feet poking out from the bottom. Although he doesn't have a lot of paint, he still has more than the average Hasbro Legends figure, and where it is, it pops out very well. There's a slight problem with how the legs are painted though. The thighs are sprayed in silver, but they're set up so that the mushroom pegs are painted over as well. This means that the thigh swivel is dangerously tight. If I can avoid it, I don't use the thigh swivel at all.
Oh shit, I think it's gotten stuck. Ah, damn it. Won't even come off the ball trying to fix it. Okay, let's try this. Oh, thank God, it worked. It worked. Oh boy. Okay, that's it. That is the last time I use the thigh swivel for the purpose of this review.
Another gripe I have is the head, which although painted well, uses gunmetal. Putting gunmetal on black causes an effect where their head becomes very hard to see. It's like a black hole was placed on the top of his body, sucking away all the vibrancy. Finally, the backpack is needlessly complicated and doesn't have anywhere to lock in. It's not so floppy in the way that it won't hold its position, but posing it is a pain. The main complaint I would have would be the size though. He's just way too big. Next to Longhaul, who should logically be the largest of the Constructicons, he's even taller. I get that he's the leader, but seriously, why do this? Each figure's articulation is largely the same, with only a few deviations here and there. The head is sadly locked in place, which is a problem 5 out of the 6 figures have. The arms have ball-jointed shoulders and ball-jointed elbows, which is uniform across all figures. The legs have ball-jointed hips, a thigh swivel.
Not doing it. Give me a sec. Just imagine this is his thigh swivel. Yeah, thigh swivel. This is totally Scrapper's thigh swivel. He has a thigh swivel that works, whatever.
And an impressive range of bend. Most differences in the articulation, if not all, can be seen in the legs due to the different transformations. Next up we have Mixmaster, and the biggest flaw in my ordering system is that the worst set happens to be the second. Honestly, where do I start? Everything is just wrong. The chest is a big, flat, unpainted mess that hardly stands out in its sculpting. The head is literally a flat panel and on an incredibly thin backpack support. The legs are disastrously out of proportion with the rest of the body, and due to this stupid foot design, he topples over super easily despite not being that back heavy. And honestly, was there no way to allow the backpack to shift down just a little bit? No sliding rails? No hinges? Nope. I do like the touch of the gun slipping out over his head, but everything else is just a disaster. His articulation is mainly the same aside from extra shoulder hinges due to the transformation, and only a 90-degree knee bend. You can cheat by using the hinges for combined mode, but it looks very ugly. Honestly, couldn't they have incorporated these hinges into the robot mode somehow? Was there no way there could have been a fold-out panel? Or how about just letting the feet slide all the way forward? No? Nothing? Well honestly, this guy to Devastator is what Combinables Brawl is to Bruticus. Yes, he's the worst of the set, but since he's a leg you can't really leave him out. Although Scrapper looks the best, Longhaul is by far my favourite. Looking at how well they pulled off his robot mode, I'm made even more aware of how bad the Combinables version is. Also, this guy has elbows that don't get stuck in sideways movement, so it's instantly a plus. He may have less paint than the others overall, but it pops way more than Mixmaster's did. I only have a few minor complaints. The first is the backpack, or lack thereof. He's a bit plain at the back there. Also, he has a butt plate. It's a bit annoying, but it doesn't really ruin the figure. Besides, who displays their figures from the back, am I right? Well, I don't really display mine to begin with, preferring to fiddle with them every now and again, but that's just me. The other gripe is the articulation. Unfortunately, he has no thigh swivel. You think it's not that bad, but this is in the style of a modern Legends figure, and not a modern Legion figure, and it's a rare occurrence to not have a thigh swivel, through either a dedicated mushroom peg or a simple ball joint. However, it's not that bad when you realise how his legs transform into the combined mode thighs. Also, he has a ball joint at the head, and some extra backwards shoulder action if you mistransform him, so that kind of makes up for it. Well, not really, but it is something. Next up, Hooks brings the last of the hide adding, and, well, here's a bit of a weird one. The paint looks great, and he has some great articulation, which is basically the same as Mixmaster, including the upward shoulder rotation, but some weird choices have been made. His head sculpt kinda looks ugly, and from certain angles it looks like he's even grinning. The backpack cleans up nicely, and he doesn't feel like his back is hollow, but it's connected to the head, so the hook looks like a ponytail. Also, you can see Devastator's head through the chest. No idea why they did this. Is it to avoid it getting stuck? None of these are huge problems, only minor nitpicks. My only real issue is the ankles, which don't really support the weight if it shifts to the back. Otherwise, he's okay. Certainly not the best Legends figure in the world, but not terrible either. Bonecrusher unfortunately suffers due to his arm transformation system, particularly in the proportions. For starters, the legs are slightly too far apart to work as treads in the vehicle mode. They look nice and have great paint, but if they were closer together they look a lot better. The chest is also painted very nicely, but overall the torso is just too wide. Coupled with the short arms, although he's about the size as everyone else, he ends up looking like a midget. You can partially fix this by clicking the waist up one bit, and it looks much better. Sure, now it looks like he's wearing a shirt that's several sizes too big, but it's a lot better than he previously had. Although he does look terrible from the side, but it was like that before the fix anyway. Also, his chest is painted very nice, but this spot for the Decepticon symbol has me worried that it's a little too wide, a little too spiky. When the upper labels arrive, I hope it fits well, but for now it doesn't really look that good. As for his articulation, he swaps out the thigh swivel for a ball-jointed knee that gets the same effect, and he gains some upward shoulder movement. Finally, Scavenger is similar to Bonecrusher, but he lacks the proportional options. He may not retain the circular chest details in full as his animation and G1 toy versions did, however there is a hint of it in the chest. Also, somehow they managed to make the chest folding up look good. Props to them. Hasbro just gave up and stuck it on its back. The same problem with him looking bad on the side remains. However, it's miles above Bonecrusher. One thing Bonecrusher did better though was with the head sculpt. This just looks ugly. Also, between the two arms, some might complain about the combinacle on the back, but honestly it folds up fairly well and doesn't look too out of place from any angle, other than straight at the back. He also doesn't require the slightly folded up waist trick to look good. Because he shares the same legs as Bonecrusher, the articulation deviation is the same. However, he doesn't get the extra shoulder stuff as his transformation from the top is a bit different. Even with all their faults though, they still look good together. Except for Scrapper, he is still too big. Transforming them into vehicle mode isn't very difficult. Aside from lining up Longhaul's legs with the back section and getting Mixmaster's legs in place, it's all smooth sailing. However, I feel like some of the key steps that could have cleaned up the robot mode have been left out, especially on Mixmaster. In the end though, it's not terrible. The vehicle modes are actually quite good, even though they don't really make up for the robot modes. Scrapper is unfortunately still too big, but he looks pretty good aside from the oversized wheels and the unsightly gap between the cab sections and the engine. Mixmaster also looks pretty good, but unfortunately his legs don't lock in that great. They rely on friction and a single tab, which is very prone to rotating for no reason.
Actually, it's 2 pegs, sorry, but it's still very easy to misalign everything. It's still very annoying.
If you like the articulated truck cab, which is a ridiculous idea, then rejoice. Otherwise it's not really good. But hey, at least his concrete barrel rolls. Longhaul's great aside from some weird proportions at the front and the wheels that don't really work due to a lack of clearance. Although why Scrapper and Longhaul have wheels anyway when the rest don't is beyond me. Hook's crane may be a little short, but overall there aren't that many issues. Unfortunately, Scavenger and Bonecrusher look pretty messy due to how the arms work. Scavenger gets away with it due to his added articulation, but Bonecrusher looks utterly ridiculous. Hey guys, I'm totally hiding my head under here. This is my cab. Yeah, this is my cab. That said, when you put them all together, the only thing that really looks out of place is Scrapper, as usual. He just needs to be a little bit smaller. I was going to give each of these a score, but since you can only really buy the box set, and since no one gets these separately on the second-hand market, unlike the Dinobots, what the hell were you thinking, there's no point. Transforming Devastator into combined mode is a mixed bag, but I'd be lying if I didn't say it was somewhat like constructing a monument, as Devastator should be. Most of the annoyances have to do with Scrapper and Hook, and for once it isn't a size issue. You have to half-transform Scrapper back into his robot mode only to clip him on and then transform him back. It's not hard, it's just monotonous. As for Hook, his pegs are interesting but a bit fiddly. Also, the chest wing is a bit of an annoyance, but I'll get to that later. As for minor things, I don't like the connections to the arms. They're far too weak, whereas the rest of it pegs in rock solid. It's annoying, and they should have thought it out better. This is clearly Devastator. DX9 updated the look just a bit to involve lots of mechanical details, but the idea of Devastator is nailed in this mode. So why am I not overjoyed by it? Well, aside from the great sculpt and the fantastic paintwork, there's sadly not a lot to work with here. For starters, Scrapper is unfortunately the worst part. He's still way too big, and his extra ankle tilt doesn't work because it's relying on a curved scoop. Personally, I like to fold it up like this, but even that's a stretch. Mixmaster looks great, but then you have to deal with a messy cap that likes to distort when all you want to do is access the ankle tilt. The torso looks okay, but the chest is far too small. It's a nice idea to have it made out of the crane, but the end result just doesn't work very well. And before you say it's better for not using parts forming, I don't see Combiner Kibble as parts forming. And as you're already building it from multiple parts, and already the hands are pegged on separately, they really should have just made the whole thing with Combiner Kibble. Also, the right shoulder doesn't really like to tab in very well. He's right, you're left. But the worst part about it would have to be the articulation. The head is on a ball joint, as should be expected, and the arms are on universal joints. Thing is though, no bicep swivel. Just rotation and out is all you get. And due to the kibble, out doesn't even get you 90 degrees. And before you say this tiny thing here is a bicep swivel, please, no, go back to school. This barely counts. As does the elbow. There's almost no way to get 90 degrees out of this thing unless you have it turn it around to the hollow section to lodge it between the tread. And even then the lower arm is so small and the upper so big that it looks creepy. His hands rotate, and you get 2 hinges on the trigger finger and the other 3. The thumb is also ball jointed. Unfortunately, there's no tabs here to hold the gun in place, which is a shame, because it's a rather nice gun. Nicely sculpted, that is. No paint whatsoever, sadly. No waist swivel, which is dumb on a combiner. What is this, Hasbro? A combiner with 5 parts can get away with it, but with 6, and especially one that costs over 200 Australian, might I add. No, just no. We get universal hips that get not even 45 degrees due to the skirt armor that doesn't work. The thigh swivels that are rendered useless when the knees can't go beyond 45 degrees, and ankle tilts that, well, actually they work fine. Yes, something actually works for once! You can customize the configuration of Scavenger though, with several ways to fold him up. But the point is, it's too little, too late. For a size comparison, he's only a head taller than a Hasbro Voyager. Let me put that into perspective. This figure's supposed to be worth over 4 times that, yet still doesn't deliver on the basic articulation in combined mode. Even at $20 a figure, this doesn't feel worth it. And mind you, I got a good deal on it. Usually this thing's $40 a figure at least, and for that price I could start army building the Sharkticons, or go have a nice meal, or go to 3 movies. Times that by 6, and you've got so much more you can spend it on. Whilst I have no malice against the seller, unfortunately I have to rate this 2 stars. The robot modes are okay, and the vehicle modes are good, but honestly the combined mode cancels it all out. You don't buy a combiner for the vehicles. You just don't. Besides, I rate a figure based on the whole package, because I like to transform these regularly. And honestly, I've bought things that I thought were more overpriced, but I've gotten much more fun out of them than I got out of this. Yes, it's a high 2 stars and almost 3, but I can't in good conscience recommend this. The more I look at it, the more I'm glad it didn't make the top spot. I'm also incredibly worried at how they're going to handle Predaking, because generally speaking beast combiners are far harder to do than standard vehicles, because you can't have random legs sticking out everywhere. The paint is great, the sculpt is great, and this thing oozes Devastator, but sadly the hardware isn't up to snuff. Is it better than the G1 version? Of course it is. Is it better than the Hasbro Combiner? Indeed it is, although that's not really hard to achieve. However, it's still not worth the asking price, and even if you get the KO, you'll easily be disappointed.